We saw earlier how we could use a VLOOKUP to look up the item reference from an items table and then populate our order form. So we entered our item ID here and we had a lookup formula to work out the unit cost, multiplication for the total, and then a lookup to bring in the description and to bring in the weight. Everything worked fine. However, what we didn't cover at that time was what would happen if we tried to look up a non-existent item ID. It may be that we make one up, and it has the same pattern, 3 letters, 4 numbers. However, it's a non-existent ID in our data and returns NA, 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 and NA all the way across, because the lookup will not find a return. So this is missing data or non-existent data in our lookup table. Now the same issue will occur if, for example, we try to populate the remainder of our order form already with formulas. Then here, where we're not actually ordering anything, we end up with a lot of NAs. The way around this is to run an if statement that checks to see if the result is NA, and if it is, not actually put anything out into the order form. So let's use the first formula here, the one that looks up the unit cost. So we change the formula to say if, open brackets, and then is NA, the whole of our lookup. So effectively, the whole of the VLOOKUP formula sits inside the isNA formula to check whether it is NA. If it is NA, then we'd actually like to return a 0 because there is no unit price in the data, comma, what to do if the result of the isNA is false, i.e. there is a value to find, then we'll make use of the VLOOKUP again. Now I did actually do a little cheat there and copy and then paste the VLOOKUP formula, really to make sure I didn't make a mistake in it. So that's a straightforward if. One set of criteria, is it NA, our VLOOKUP? If so, then 0 becomes the output. If not, then we'll actually go ahead and carry out the VLOOKUP. And then we get a 0 unit cost here when the item ID does not exist. I can copy that down as a formula and we see zeros all the way, except when we actually use a correct ID as here, we effectively get the unit cost. Now the total column doesn't need to check if it's NA because it's only doing a multiplication of these two cells, and we're putting a 0 in here if there is no unit cost, therefore the total will become 0. For the description, we do need to run a check. So equals if, open brackets, is NA, open brackets, and then that's where I did the copying last time. Highlight the VLOOKUP and copy. Close the isNA brackets, comma. This time if there is no description, then we'll simply put out an empty string, so that's speech marks, nothing in them, speech marks, comma. If the NA is false, then we want to output the VLOOKUP. Close the round brackets for your if statement, and we get a blank cell, or the appearance of a blank cell. There is a formula in there, and when I replicate that to the bottom, we lose all these NAs here, but where the actual ID does exist, we see the description. So the last one is then the weight, and effectively we're going to run the same thing, equals if is NA, open brackets, of the VLOOKUP. Then if it is NA, we'll output a 0. If it isn't, then we'll output the value of the VLOOKUP, close the if statement, and then whatever comes out of this if statement then gets multiplied by the quantity that have been purchased. So if a 0 comes out because of the ID not existing, then the weight becomes 0. And in fact, it does for that first item, and we replicate this to the bottom, and where the ID does exist, it pulls out the weight and goes ahead and carries out the calculation of the weight multiplied by the quantity. Where it doesn't exist, we end up with zeros, and the total shipping weight at the bottom then adds up correctly. It doesn't require an if, because we've negated all those NAs against the actual VLOOKUP. Let's go back to the first item and put in a valid item number, and that's the rugby mug and coaster set. We purchased 3, it now looks up the unit cost, works out the total, adds that into the order total, works out the weight, adds that into the total weight, and displays the description for our order form. So we've looked at there how to deal with data not actually existing in your lookup table, either because of an error, in this case with the item ID, or the fact there is no reference for the item in your lookup table.